Hello there, I'm Nick, and this is Portable, where we look at the portable ports of console games. And I need to tell you this up front, this episode was not originally intended to be a standalone experience. This is part 2 of a larger video discussing every version of Sonic Colors. And because of that, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about might not make sense out of context, or it might seem like I'm just bringing up things out of nowhere as I continue points I was making in part 1. The only reason I chop this up is because I have a very old computer, and it was chugging badly when I was trying to edit together a 90-minute behemoth all on its own. And I figured this would be the best compromise. We'll just split it up and we'll combine it all later. But if you have not seen part 1, there's going to be a link in the description, and I'm sure I'll put it up here somewhere for you, just so you're not caught off guard. Because I really only talk about the DS version of Sonic Colors for like the first half of this video, and even then there's a lot of comparisons to the Wii version, and yeah, it just doesn't make sense by itself, so just wanted to give you the heads up. With all that said, let's hop back into it with Sonic Colors DS. This version, having been developed by Dimps, who made the 2 Rush games prior, made their version feel like a 3rd Rush game. And in turn, Colors DS is often considered a part of the Rush trilogy, as that series never got a proper 3rd entry, but this one still feels very similar to what Dimps had built up prior. And if you are a fan of those games, you're likely going to enjoy this one as well. Not every change might suit your fancy, and I'll admit, it's been far too long since I played Rush 1 and 2 to give you a proper comparison, but the lack of a playable Blaze will be sorely missed by Rush fans. And there are a few personal gripes I have with this game. I've never been a fan of the somewhat flat designs of the environments, and being on such a small screen, it can be a bit of an issue when you not only have to run fast, but boost as well. But that second screen does help mitigate the issue somewhat. Sure, you can't always see everything right in front of you horizontally, but Dimps has definitely improved on their enemy and hazard placements. And of course, you do have a better idea of what's above and below you, and the levels are designed with this in mind. But not only that, the game itself is designed with boost in mind. All the mechanics work well together, all while implementing a lot of moves you're gonna find in the console Big Brother. Actually, let's just get into it here at the beginning, because there are some interesting changes you're gonna notice right off the bat when you compare this to the Wii version. First off, the game starts things with a proper cutscene, showing Sonic and Tails arriving at the theme park. And I get that people prefer jumping right into the action with the console version, and I think that worked very well for Generations, but for Colors, I always found the flashback of the elevator after a couple levels just kinda jarring. I know it's a very minor detail, but I do feel the pacing is just a little better here on the DS version when it comes to the story. I know they have a lot more limitations, but for me, this was the first indication that this version was trying to do things a little bit better than the console version. Sonic and Tails arrive at the theme park the same time the player does, and it helps adjust you to this strange new world in terms of narrative pacing as well as gameplay, as we can see with an optional tutorial. And I appreciate that it's both optional and, well, that there's a tutorial here at all. Because while this does share a lot of similarities with the console version in terms of mechanics, it still plays very differently, and even changes that might seem somewhat arbitrary can probably throw you off if you're expecting a watered-down version of the Wii game, because this is definitely not that. There were changes here I genuinely forgot about, and was surprised to see after I got done playing Sonic Colors Ultimate and the Wii version, because some of these changes address some of my critiques of the console version. For instance, you don't double jump, you instead do an air dash, which makes more sense because if you did a homing attack without a target, it would look something like that, so that makes sense. Like I keep stressing anytime I ever talk about it, I don't always like homing attacks on a 2D plane. It was brought into the 3D games for a very specific purpose, but all that said, it is implemented fairly cleverly here, rewarding players who react quickly with optional paths that would be somewhat hard to reach otherwise. The wall jump is still here, but it only works on walls with specific patterns, which completely removes accidental jumps that I kept having in the console version. But that's gonna be a double-edged sword depending on what you prefer. The Wii version's wall jump, allowing you to jump anywhere, means you can get creative with it, but the DS version means you can only use it in very specific spots. They place it sporadically, sometimes being an extra boost just to get you up a corridor if you fall a little short, and sometimes it's its own unique platforming challenge by placing spikes in certain spots, forcing you to land those jumps very carefully. Both have their pros and cons, but I prefer the implementation of the DS version. And this game also has the spin dash. Okay. Look, you're probably not going to use it a whole lot, but I still have used it occasionally. And I just appreciate a Sonic game allowing for rolling in general. I think it's so weird that the Wii version doesn't have that. And I'm sure speedrunners can get very creative with this. You can boost into a spin dash or spin dash into a boost, and it's rad. And if you run out of boost, it's just nice to have here. It's also nice to have the original rev up and jump noises. I love that. I also love that this version further emphasizes that the boost is a Wisp power for colors. Sonic doesn't even start the game with this ability. You have to go through all of Act 1 of Tropical Resort without it. This lets you appreciate a more standard Sonic moveset when you can't rely on the boost, and you get to appreciate the boost that much more when you're finally allowed to use all of its spoogey white Wisp glory. The levels are designed with Sonic in mind, as opposed to feeling like it's plopping Sonic into someone else's game. It's an absolute thrill to play through. Even the Wisps feel better here. You don't have to awkwardly stop everything you're doing. For the most part, the abilities keep the hedgehog moving. And this version of the game does have its own unique flavor of Wisps as well. You have the burst ability, which will turn you into a fireball that you can charge up and launch off in any direction you feel like, helping you clear out dangerous bombs, which in turn will help you move forward or activate some fun level gimmicks. You also have the void ability, which is a little slower, but is far more satisfying to maneuver and destroy things when compared to Frenzy. You may also notice that some Wisp powers did not make it over to this version of the game, such as the hover or the block Wisp. It's almost as if the mechanics and level design would not have meshed super well with blocks. Oh darn, what a shame. The rocket still has you launch up into the air and slowly float down, but again, I think it's better utilized here, like having to get enough momentum to launch up in the air, homing attack a line of enemies, pick up the rocket, and then activate it in that same spot before you drop back down to the earth below. They keep you moving forward, and you have to react quickly while you pick up the Wisps. Oh god, and the drill! I will admit it is still a bit of a pain in the ass. They do constrict you quite a bit while having you get chased down by some big machines, which is a cool idea. I just needed a little bit more work. But if nothing else, I do appreciate the thematic consistency. It shows up on Planet Wisp, where all the construction is happening. That makes way more sense than the console version. That said, the map layout is largely similar to the console counterpart, but they have a clear distinction between acts and missions. Unlike the console game where everything is called an act, regardless of how long or short the level can be, the DS version made an obvious change with its more standard acts and these smaller, more focused missions. These also provide fun cameos for most of Sonic's cast. And yeah, they're mostly just still images, but it still adds a bit of character to this surprisingly empty world. And the DS map also gives you hints as to what you should be expecting in the acts themselves. What's that dinosaur corpse up to? Better go find out. I do think the console overworlds are a lot of fun in their own right, with plenty of detailed animation that's just fun to soak in, but there's nothing here indicating what these levels are all about, which kind of is the function of most other overworlds. The red rings here also represent the priority of each of the respective versions. A lot of the time, I feel like the DS red rings are placed in spots that will guide you through the optimal and usually most challenging route through a level, making you be as fast and efficient as possible with Wisp and boost abilities. The console version has plenty of rings that feel similar to that, but a lot of the time you're gonna have to stop everything just to track one down or figure out a platforming puzzle. And obviously, since you have special stages separate from the red rings, those don't unlock Super Sonic. They instead unlock concept art, which is nice. I don't know why that wasn't on the console version, but whatever, they're here. I also gotta say, I much prefer the multiplayer of the DS version. They don't have a bunch of levels set aside and built specifically for it like the console version. You have to play through the acts as they are, but again, these are just designed to move you through as quickly as possible, so they make for great race courses against an opponent, and they give you abilities to help you slow your opponent down, or in turn for you to dodge from your opponent. And they actually provided you a lot of ways to interact with other players. Multi-cart play, single cart play, local connection, Wi-Fi. Hell, if you wanted to just go solo, you can race an AI. And on top of all this, you get a time attack mode. None of this is mind-blowing, and it was also kind of standard, but these are still fun little extras to help get extended playtime from your game. And if that wasn't enough, there are special stages. Not this tedious block nonsense, just a good old-fashioned half-pipe, which, yeah, I know that's a bit overplayed, but I'd say it's utilized best here, because they have you use the touchscreen. You just pick up balls of a certain color like Sonic Heroes, but the touchpad is super responsive. Sonic is just as quick as your stylus, and I actually had a lot of fun going through these things. And while I can't unlock Super Sonic for the core levels, levels, which does suck, you do at least get a true final boss, which I did appreciate. And it's against the Mother Wisp. Huh. Look, I know the Mother Wisp is a weird design, and this does feel like it kind of comes out of nowhere, but they do allude to it in the cutscenes, and yeah, there are a lot of spots in these quick cutscenes that seem to play up some fun concepts, including the corrupted Mother Wisp and the Nega Wisps being crazed, vicious versions of the standard variety. I should note that the actual final fight is extremely tedious, but I do love the idea. I really wish the console version played with this a bit more. Sure, we do have an unlockable Super Sonic, and I'm happy about that, but I don't know, man. Secret final bosses are a lot of fun. And speaking of the DS version, I even like the way they have you interact with each new Wisp in a cutscene that has you utilize the touchscreen. I don't generally like the Wisps, but at least the handheld version is making a big deal about unlocking a new ability, as opposed to just starting level and just running into it like the console version does. It's just crazy because all the lacking elements I found about the Wii edition seem to be made up for in the DS edition. This game sets Sonic the Hedgehog loose onto a theme park. How do you not go wild with that idea? There are a lot of great spots in the console version, but it also feels like it added all the long wait lines you'd find in real amusement parks. And when they baby it up as much as they do here, it makes me think this game doesn't think its players are tall enough to get on the rides. All of that said, though, I don't know if I would choose DS colors over console colors. While it does a lot of stuff the console version doesn't do, it really only shines in relation to the Wii counterpart. I couldn't even really call this the best Rush game. I'd just call it another Rush game. And while the console game is a bit too stiff and slow and Mario-y, this game goes into the other extreme. Rarely does it ever actually try to be a platformer, and you can thank the boost for that and wait for another video before we really pick that apart. And the few times it does force you to slow down, well, you ride a glowing whale. DS is fine if you are familiar with the Rush formula, or maybe handheld dimp Sonic in general, but looking at this from the perspective of someone who maybe has never even picked up a controller before, well, I think the Wii version makes a better first impression. I've seen a lot of people talking about the original Colors game like it was this obscure game that nobody had the chance to play. It stayed on just one console before it got ported to Ultimate, and yeah, that can't be denied. You can't really play it on other hardware outside of the Wii, but it was sold on the Wii, and it sold just about as well as Unleashed on less platforms. This is far from lost media, and ironically enough, being exclusive to Nintendo probably gave the game its best possible chance to succeed. And you might be asking, what exactly does that have to do with anything? Well, as much as I want Sonic to be this one specific thing, or how many other ideas were not utilized, or what came out after, I think it's important to understand the intent of the game itself and judge it on those merits, or at least put them into consideration. I've spent an obnoxious amount of time complaining and comparing this to Mario, and I do understand how ridiculous that sounds. That's like The Simpsons did it of video games. Comparing anything to Mario is just a moot point. Mario probably did it first. But I do again think there was a lot of intentional Mario choices made when making Sonic Colors. Again, Azuka said as much, and that's actually kind of brilliant. Sure, there is a lot of basic 2D platforming, but it makes the boost sections that much more appealing. And having all those gameplay elements mixed together in the same levels, that's a great way to get a kid who may have only ever known Mario games up to that point a little more accustomed to Sonic gameplay. That's literally what Sonic 1 did. And back in 2010, just like 1991, Sega would have been out of their minds not to tempt some Mario kids over to the blue side. And yes, I know there were a lot of great ideas left on the table with the Adventure era, but the brand was not doing too hot back then. Each game was getting more and more panned with each release, and 06 was the breaking point, not just for gaming press, but for longtime fans, and for Sonic Team themselves. And the aftermath was so widespread that it went and affected the goodwill that Unleashed could have had. It's an undeniable improvement from 06 in terms of gameplay, and yes, I know a lot of people are coming out now now and talking about how fun the game can actually be, but back then, if Sonic put one single red shoe out of line, there would be hell to pay. And seeing this giant, stretchy, slow variation was enough for me, and apparently a lot of others, to announce the game dead on arrival. Sega had to play it safe with their next title, and even that requires an extreme amount of precision. And having Dimps and Sonic Team just focus up on one console each, and very underpowered ones, was the smartest move to make, especially considering the consoles they were releasing on. As underpowered as they were, it cannot be understated just how well Nintendo's two game machines were doing at the time. As hard as it is right now in the year 2021 to find a PS5 or Series X, it was just as hard, if not more so, to track down a Nintendo Wii. And even then it was hard to track down specific titles. Mario titles. Not so much Galaxy, Mario Kart certainly, but also...
New Super Mario Brothers! Whee!
A back-to-basics Mario game that was just doing crazy numbers. And Sega was not releasing a Sonic game for a Sega system to a Sega audience. They were releasing it on Nintendo hardware when Nintendo was at their absolute prime. Stronger than when Sega themselves fought them. The Switch might overtake one of them eventually, but as of right now, the Wii is still the best-selling Nintendo console ever, and the DS is still their best-selling handheld console ever. So yes, trying to attract the Mario crowd just made sense. And while the next game released on different hardware than the Wii, it sure got kids primed and ready for an even more refined boost game that celebrated the entire legacy of Sonic. That at the very least gives me some sense of appreciation. There's a larger conversation to be had, especially with hindsight and with Lost World and everything else under the belt, but just considering what this game was trying to do and who they were trying to appeal to, I think it did the job quite well. And not only that, despite my own complaints, there's actually a lot I love about this game. I don't go back and replay it all the time, but that aside, some of my favorite music tracks, gaming moments, setting, some of my favorite stuff from any part of the Sonic franchise is found right here in this game. Despite my complaints about the 2D sections of the Wii edition, like I keep saying, they did put in a lot of clever level design. Even the puzzle rooms have a flow about them, and it's satisfying to figure out. Sometimes it's okay to slow down for a second. I do think they went a bit too far in that regard, but a lot of this is going to come down to personal preference as opposed to being actual flaws in the game design. I do like the DS game focusing more on Sonic's speed and keeping a consistent style of gameplay, but if I'm honest, it does drain on me a little bit. And look, I'm sorry, but spectacle matters when it comes to these games. The setting is wildly inventive and the soundtrack follows suit. The art direction is top-notch in colors, and there's this magical blend between the environments and the beats you'd hear while racing through them. There's always a lead-in with the music introducing you to the level with the loading screen before it drops that energetic melody as Sonic gets moving. And while I like to complain about the cutscenes, if you remove them, you'd probably have a solid understanding of what's going on in the narrative, a strength of the classic Sonic games at their full potential. And it's a shame the cutscenes take so much of the attention because what's being told in the melody of each track and in the settings, set pieces, backgrounds, layout, hazards, enemies, and boss battles can truly be engaging. Simple, sure, but where the words fall short in the narrative, everything else shines. The game starts at the tropical resort, completely different from your more natural settings Sonic games usually start in, but still tonally fitting as a starting area. This is where you arrive at the park. This is the Disneyland Main Street. This is where you shop. This is where you check into your hotel. This is the central hub where the rest of the park branches out. It's warm, welcoming, and celebratory. You practice homing attacks on balloon clusters. Even egg ponds are waving around welcome signs. All this while giving you a gorgeous view of the world below and teasing powers yet to be unlocked, inviting you to come back to the resort from time to time. And they'll do this for the rest of the game as you unlock Wisp powers. This game felt like a vacation from all the dreary drama surrounding this franchise. It makes you excited to see what other attractions await. And even if it's not Green Hill, even without all the natural vegetation, the theme is just as inviting, riding the waves of that surf rock guitar, all leading to that explosive party. And this gets remixed in different ways for each act going forward, and that's the case for every level. But like every other level, the first act's music is usually the strongest of the compositions. The next world from there is Sweet Mountain, and I don't care what anyone says, running around giant junk food is awesome. I absolutely love when the games get creative with level themes while staying consistent with the overall game setting. What kind of amusement park lacks concessions? This isn't a standard rinky-dink theme park, this is in space and they're gonna get ridiculous with it. Donuts, lollipops, hamburgers, popcorn actually popping as you roll through them, drifting through giant gingerbread men like you're a sore loser who just lost a game of Candyland. Willy Wonka can stuff his golden ticket. I'll die of diabetes at the peak of Sweet Mountain. As for the music, I don't know if it really tonally fits, but it's loud, it's bombastic, and it is unique on its own. I know exactly what that theme is the moment it starts playing. And there is still this artificial element to all of the environment if you look a little bit closely at the giant food on display. You'll see screws and panels showing that this isn't actually giant food all the time, and you do see some factory process going on here. And for some reason, jelly beans are being stored into missiles. Is this just a easier means to transport them around the park, or is this alluding to some candy-themed warfare? Wouldn't put it past Eggman. This is the same dude who had a fish-themed fleet. And speaking of fleets, up next is the Starlight Carnival, and despite some platforming tedium I've already talked about, the set pieces of this world are something special. Having Sonic run around a giant light parade, something that's usually bound to streets, is now blown up in the limitless expanse of outer space. But as you make your way through some of the innards of these ships, there seems to be something more sinister going on once you get past the bright lights. And later on in the first act, we see countless ships warp into uniform place. As you progress through the level, it looks less like a parade and more like an armada prepped for war. As big as the ideas of a theme park get in space, so too are the military capabilities of Eggman. And this level is showing us just how dangerous things can potentially get if Sonic doesn't put a stop to this carnival. And following all that up is Planet Wisp, and I'm sure plenty of you who originally checked colors out back in the day might remember the opening moments of this world just as prominently, if not more so, than Tropical Resort. This is the turning point in our wordless narrative, where we push past all the bright lights, treats, and rides, and reveal something wonderful and horrible all at the same time. And that piano, while being another lead-in to an energetic track, has this beautiful sadness to it that isn't present in any other part of the soundtrack leading up to this point. The title scene cuts away, revealing a field of untamed grass, and as soon as Sonic is done stretching, he takes off. That sad piano now joined on stage by a more positive, energetic melody, something to get the player moving and motivated as the natural world is quickly stripped away by Eggman's construction. And you do hear thematic elements of that as well in the music as that carries on as well. We are halfway through the game and only now are we seeing your standard forested green level you'd expect at the start of most Sonic games, placed in the middle, but still actually showing the same role, just all in one go, showing you the true, terrible cost of this ridiculous park. And like the music track, the level themes clash to create something unique. You're not actually on any part of the theme park for this area, and part of me always thought it was a little bit weird that they didn't show the theme park for Sonic Generations and instead showed off Planet Wisp, but considering the importance in the story and the kind of impact it left on us, I can understand why they went with that instead of anything else. Aquatic Park is a return to the park, and truth be told, there's not much new being added to the narrative itself. This is yet another attraction, which could be seen as something of a water park or a high-end sushi restaurant. Maybe a little mix of both. Regardless, this is a unique take on a water level, both with the setting, the more traditional Japanese theme infused with water hazards, as well as a new way for Sonic to traverse water. He can still slow down, but you actually can move him through the stuff by constantly jumping. You still have water bubbles, but also protective fish who can keep you from drowning. I already went over my general thoughts on the more open spaces with the drill, but it is kind of nice to have a different way to interact with this very notorious element of the franchise. Then we get to the final planetoid, Asteroid Coaster, and this one just looks straight up sinister, but I love how it's almost intentional, like Eggman knew it was always going to look bad, so he just played into it. This looks dangerous, so of course, that's where you put the most thrilling rides. And I gotta say, at least for the main acts, the level layouts feel so clever. Again, mostly in the spots where Sonic is allowed to just be Sonic. I had so much fun jumping between roller coasters, homing to attack asteroids, zipping around planet rings. They totally missed a great spot for a Sega Saturn reference, but whatever. This area is exhilarating, and while all this is happening, the game is continuing its narrative. This is the horrible outcome of Eggman's abuse use of the Wisps, turning them into Nega Wisps. This is where we're introduced to the barely controllable Frenzy, and it all makes for a great last level, all while fitting with the theme of being an amusement park. Then of course you have Terminal Velocity, which is a great set for escaping this craziness as it's blowing up, and the final boss itself. And maybe we don't have a final supersonic fight, but this still fits quite thematically with everything else going on here, and it's very satisfying to help Wisps escape and then have them all combined to take Eggman out once and for all. And that's not all I have to say about these level themes. It only now dawns on me after doing research for this video that there's a lot of Sonic 1 in these designs. And I'm not talking about the level layouts from the multiplayer stages, though those are very lovely references. I mean the themes themselves. Look at this concept art for Green Hill Zone. It's basically Tropical Resort. And if you think about it, the beta build had UFOs in the sky of Marble Garden, and if you look at the concept art for Marble Garden, it's got these strange tiles just floating in the air, kind of like the ones you saw from Starlight Carnival. Oh, and actually, when you think about that name, we do have Starlight Zone, and good lord, look at that art. A water theme level with a lot of Japanese elements, and this is just what I could find on Sonic Retro. I can't even imagine what else we might be missing out on, and I sincerely doubt this is a coincidence. There's just a lot of parallels here. Isn't it funny? As much as I harped on Sonic Colors being a clone of a Mario game, it turns out this very same game stays truer to the original concepts of Sonic than even Sonic 1 did. Just, God, this game. When it comes right down to it, some of my biggest problems with the game is how limited I feel with interacting with these worlds, and again, even with the shorter 2D levels, there is a lot of interesting stuff happening here. Like, I know a lot of people found that burger level frustrating, but all you do is circle around this one giant patty, and if you're paying close enough attention to the drill tubes and grind rails, you can actually figure out a path before you even get to those sections. That's thinking in 2.5D. I know Dimps started the boost stuff, and they did a great job, but I think I just like how it feels a little bit more in 3D. I like seeing what's ahead of me, and I love looking at everything happening around me. The DS game, as focused as it can be, can provide that level of experience. Yes, running from a Ferris wheel is exhilarating, or T-Rex skulls. Does that mean they're alien dinosaurs? Whatever. But then you get hang gliding, which, I mean, that's nice. And the bosses really aren't anything to write home about on either version of the game. But for the DS version, you mostly have standard running around a ring like other Rush games, and I'm sorry Sonic, Klonoa already did that way better. They also try to emulate the console versions, but that doesn't really leave much of an impact. And while I like the idea of the Mother Wisp fight, it takes way too damn long and it's not remotely exciting. If you make a supersonic fight boring, you've screwed up somewhere. I do at least like the Nega Wisp armor incorporating Wisp powers, but if I had to choose between the console or DS version, the console version was way more fun. I found it genuinely challenging at first. It required that I put everything I had learned to the test and utilized and even combined Wisp powers in clever ways. It was only after that last boss fight that I actually feel okay with the other bosses not incorporating Wisp powers. But like I said up front, the other boss fights aren't off the hook. Between the two versions, console ones are much cooler, in concept at least. And that is my biggest problem with them. I don't get to spend enough time with these crazy designs. That, and I do feel the circular boss fights would have worked much better with classic Sonic mechanics. I love the Ferris wheel design of Tropical Resort. It's loud, it's bombastic, it's super intimidating, and it looks like it's gonna require a lot of thinking to figure out how to tackle this thing, but if you have the Laser Wisp, it's done in 2 hits. That's it. That's nothing. The size, the design of the arena, the threatening, awesome machine noise scream, and it's all over before it began. These boss fights look so cool, but it just doesn't do enough, which I guess I could say about Colors as a whole. I kind of trailed off my main point, but if you're wondering which is better between the Wii or DS version, I think the Wii will probably have the better overall experience, but the DS edition feels like it's doing all it can with the little it has to work with. I suppose it's nice that it's not just a lesser version of the console edition. It really does feel like it's trying to correct some design choices of its bigger brother. And while it doesn't look as nice, it does focus up on where it counts and provides a largely consistent gameplay experience. They provide something worthwhile that the other doesn't. And for that, I do think both deserve to be experienced. I'll put it this way, if Dimps was allowed to make the Wii version of the game with some Sonic Team supervision, that might have been the ultimate version of this game. But silly me, the ultimate version of Sonic Colors does exist, doesn't it? At least that's what they say in the name.